Hello everyone. This is the 38th part of the story, Āvātār in DC Universe. Chapter 112, A Series of Events. General point of view, one day into Aden's seclusion. A tall figure dressed in a brown hood, holding a huge book in his hands, that was bound to his wrist by a chain that ended in a manacle, stilled in place. He opened the huge book, cover made from the hide of a beast that has never existed, and closed it a second later. An impassive look crossed his face. Not unusual for him, for his visage was always kept carefully blank. He blinked his fully gray eyes and turned around. "I was not expecting to see you for another 6 years." The voice that came out of the figure was dry and gravely, showing that he didn't use it regularly. "Yeah, well, something came up," Lucifer replied, walking further into the light from the shadows cast upon the ground by the tall bookshelves arranged throughout the room. "I love what you've done with the place, Destiny. And by that, I mean, nothing." The library was the same as the last time Lucifer had been here. Time was kinda wonky in any of the endless realms, so he couldn't be bothered to recall when that was, only that it had been a very long time. Getting here was still a pain, of course. The realm being a garden of mazes that was infinite in all its encompassing context, being the representation of the Book of Destiny. For Lucifer, though, it was super easy, barely an inconvenience getting there. Then again, most things were when you had the power of bullshit on your side. "Speak, what do you need of me?" Destiny brusquely told the former archangel. Lucifer did not take the comment personally. He knew that Destiny wasn't someone you could hold a fun little conversation with, or reminisce about the good old days. Not really. And Lucifer could even appreciate that. There were a few things he hated more than getting his time wasted. "I have an offer. I want you to check something for me in your big book of destiny, fate, and all that jazz. In return, I'll owe you a favor," Lucifer replied. Destiny was ready to refuse up until Lucifer's final words. A favor from him, he couldn't pass up on such a deal. Destiny gave a nod, making Lucifer's face split into a smile. "Excellent. Let's get to it then. Elsewhere, sometime later." Nepal. Maze bent down and touched the soot covering the ground. She brought her finger to her nose and smelled it. Her face wrinkled in a frown. The soot was the charred ash of human blood and flesh. She rose up and walked around the sacrificial magical circle, studying its make and construction. The circle was burnt onto the hardened rock in one of the mountain peaks, deep in the Kangchenjunga. Snowstorms would have mostly caused the circle to be covered by now, but the residue mystical energy tampered with that, hence for anyone flying above the peaks of the mountain, they would be surprised to see the pentagram branded onto the ground. Like an ugly yet intricately drawn tattoo on skin. She took a few pictures from the camera she had taken to carrying around these days. For record keeping, of course. It's not like she was interested in how beautiful the earth actually was. Beautiful and different. Far from the pit, which was just worse in every way possible. Not for her or her brothers and sisters, though. That was their home. But for anyone else, there was a reason why hell was hellish. She snorted at the dumb joke, feeling as if Aden was rubbing off on her, and took a few more pictures of the scene. The camera then disappeared, teleported out by the Lilim. "Maze, there you are. What are you doing in this dreadful?" Lucifer's words were cut off as his gaze landed on the sacrificial circle on the ground. He had just appeared from Destiny's realm. "I see I'm not the only one who had an eventful day," he commented, while motioning to the circle on the ground, one hand in his trouser pocket. Maze crossed the distance towards him before crouching and touching the soot. She held up her finger and showed him. "Ash from sacrificed humans. I recognize this from Solomon's grimoire," he finished, studying it in interest. "Who do you think it is this time?" he asked Maze, studying the circle and surrounding areas. Maze snorted. "In case you forgot, you're the one with the omniscience. I'm just the bell with sharp daggers and a devil-may-care attitude." His eyes glowed red, the world opened up more to him as he delved deeper into what had happened here. Oh Maze, you're much more than that. No one quite brews a good cup of coffee like you do, my dear. Maze rolled her eyes and got back to studying the circle. Her eyes lit up just as she thought of something else. That node of intersection between the inner circle and the points of the triangles. The runic inscriptions. Lucifer, I think I might know what this pentagram was meant for. The devil lost the red glow in his eyes. A killing intent suddenly exploded out of him. Maze struggled to breath and looked on in shock. All around the world, sensitive mystical practitioners sensed the change. Zatara was in a Justice League meeting when his eyes widened and he hastily did the sign of the cross. Madame Xanadu was reading a client's fortune when her hand shook and she dropped the cards. Sorry. She plastered on a smile and carried on with what she was doing. Jason Blood was in his house in England, meditating to keep a leash on the urges his other half gave him when his face changed. That brief power. Then, just as quickly as it had appeared, it disappeared. A small breeze blew through the area and Maze welcomed the slight chill. It's the transfiguration of human souls into ice elementals for an ice legion. A vanguard to take over the planet. That's why he drew it here in Nepal. The tall mountains would become a good nesting place up until he was ready to usher in a new ice age. A brain-dead idea for sure, but no, that is not why I want to skin the one responsible for this maze. Lucifer explained, seeing the questioning look his companion was giving him. Maze calmed herself down, struggling to forget the weak but for her and everything else, overpowering outpour of Lucifer's killing intent. She quickly connected the dots. Then the reason you almost went nuclear is, wait, the way the circle was hastily left and the absence of the culprit. It's almost as if they ran away. Maze suddenly looked at Lucifer. You. The only person scary enough to cause a master of the mystic arts such as whoever is responsible to flee is, you. They must have heard it from Mammon. She finally understood why Lucifer was mad. Someone defied me, Maze Keen. Someone let Mammon escape and now all the demon lords know that I am on Earth. Hell is in chaos. He informed her. And now anyone who was up to something on Earth has packed it up and left. She concluded. And with Aden's presence blinding me from anything or anyone he will come across in the future, we find ourselves in quite the conundrum. Lucifer finished gravely. Now that the demon lords knew he was away from hell, Lucifer would either need to appoint an official stand-in ruler or go back and calm the chaos down. His vacation was going to be over before it even started and he was pissed. What did Destiny tell you about Aden? Maze wondered. Nothing I don't already know, which is little about a lot of things. Lucifer's face turned serious. Maze, I felt the brief surge of divine energy from him. It was unexpected. She nodded in understanding. He is growing faster than you envisioned. The devil shook his head. Yes and no. His growth in power was never a question of when but a question of what could push him further and further. Challenges, obstacles, insurmountable odds. He thrives in that state. But, as a being aligned to order and balance, being the concept itself in the manifestation of his elemental powers, the building blocks of the material world, his origin should be similar to dream, destiny and the rest of the endless, yet, that surge of divinity, felt closer to an actual god than a concept. Lucifer explained. That was the reason he had taken it upon himself to search out destiny. That will put him on the radar even more than he already is. Maze exclaimed. Take into account that my attention will now be needed elsewhere and the devil added. He will effectively be alone. A young god versus pantheons that have existed for billions of years. That's the extreme version of the plan you had. To put him in a position where he will be forced to grow or perish. Maze concluded with a sigh. Things had gotten way out of hand. There is always something worse than death, Maze. Lucifer reminded her. A brief silence settled between the two. Well, if this is what having a kid feels like, remind me to never try for one. Maze finally said. Perhaps, I can be of assistance. A deep voice sounded out. It belonged to a black man wearing a black suit and hat. On his back was a long cloak that seemed to sway even in the absence of a breeze. Stranger. Lucifer nodded as knew the man. Things might be very dire if you came to me personally. Lucy said, a smile on his face yet the cheer missing from his eyes. One wrong perceived move or annoyance and the phantom stranger knew he wouldn't walk out of here. The devil seemed pissed. The one responsible threatens the continued survival of the human race. I had to intervene. News of your presence on Earth has gone around the supernatural circles. To that effect, he has seen it fit to take his operation elsewhere. To wait you out. He paused and turned his head slightly to the sky. He has created his new base on Pluto. Far out of reach from the likes of Zatara, Blood, and any other supernatural assistance I am able to access. Belial must be stopped before his next plan catches everyone off guard. General point of view, one day into Aden's seclusion. Lightning, an agent of destruction. Destruction and speed. He was yet to decipher any of these aspects of the cold fire, but the strides he had already made were astonishing. He already had an intuitive understanding of what it was, essence-wise, and how it interacted with his body. How quickly he could hurt himself just as easily as he could someone else. In that respect, lightning was the most dangerous sub-skill he had ever wielded. His position above the mountain peak had been bombarded by the streaks of blue lightning charging in the sky. The natural energy had entered a cycle of continuous attacks upon his form, likely attracted by the comprehension he was under. And they hadn't ceased. Every few minutes the sky would roil and numerous lightning strikes would fall down on his body. Elsewhere, the watchtower. Connor could remember the feeling of taking a back seat as something else took control of his body. His body. And just when Connor had been awash with guilt at his stupidity, guilt because there was no way Aden could win this, things had changed. The first clash had happened, and although he was caught in a back foot, the other boy had proved him wrong. The battle had been intense and at a level he knew he wouldn't have reached were it not for the DNA patches in his pants pocket. Then the demon had shocked him by simply using magic to restrain his human side, and Connor had felt a rush of power run through his body that he had never felt before. A rush of power that cooled his anger, somewhat. A rush of power that made him feel like Superman. Then he'd been disgusted at enjoying it. But even as he lost the fight, even as he fell back into the abyss of unconsciousness, Connor wished nothing more than to retain that power. That strength. He woke up in the infirmary at the watchtower and felt something missing. The power, it was gone. Connor's heart was broken. Miss Martian and the team had tried to get him to open up over the week. But Connor had shut them out, worried what they would think when they read his mind and found out that nothing was enough anymore. At this point, the search for Red Tornado has hit a wall. I think we should reroute our resources into something else. Something more urgent. Green Arrow's voice reached Connor's ears through the walls of the Watchtower's meeting hall. Let me guess, you mean reroute into finding out Aden's location, correct? Stewart's voice responded. No, Green Arrow shot back. Connor was sure he wasn't the only one to notice the aggrieved note in his voice. If it were up to Oliver, that was probably what would have happened. The Apocalyptian tech smuggling ring, Intergang, has started spreading its influence out into other states and cities. A Star City gang had access to force projectors. Weapons that send a shockwave strong enough to compare to one of Wonder Woman's punches. Green Arrow is right. I was there. This particular issue is getting out of hand. I move to propose we exclusively focus our attention on Intergang. At least until we halt, if not outright uproot, Mannheim's whole operation. Black Canary seconded Green Arrow's proposal. I've had a few run-ins with goons using Intergang tech as well. I have the Central City Star Labs branch looking into the workings of the devices I confiscated. Hopefully we should have a way to source them out using their unique energy signature the minute any shipments arrive on Earth. The Flash informed them. But that is treating the symptoms more than the disease. Darkseid's people could simply make another intergang. Superman's words cooled the mood somewhat in the room. Connor was only able to tell it through the loud sigh given of by Wonder Woman. By Hera, this whole month has been a series of unexpected twists and turns. Hal, is there anything the Guardians can do about Apocalypse? I believe we have gathered sufficient evidence to show them breaking many interplanetary violations. Sorry. Apocalypse is a touchy subject for the Guardians. Barring a direct attack, there is little I or any of the Lanterns can do. We stay out of the fight between New Genesis and Apocalypse. Hal Jordan answered. Hey, by the way, did you get Ring checked up? What was wrong with it? The Flash wondered out loud, referencing to what had happened almost 2 days ago when Jordan's and Gardner's rings had started acting up. Inside the meeting hall, everyone paid close attention to Hal's next words. The Lantern in question shook his head. Not really. Apparently neither of us have the required clearance to access that information. That said, I was able to talk to one of the older Lanterns and what I got was this: the ring checked out briefly because of a unique energy pulse called apotheosis. A phenomenon that happens when a mortal's essence or truth of being enters a metamorphosis into a divine being. Diana sucked in a breath. That does not sound good. The last apotheosis or ascension of a mortal to a god happened eons ago. Long before our time. Dionysus. The god of wines and ecstasy. She explained in a grim tone. I will need to commune with the gods and see if I can find out anything else. John, could Mars have leads on this information? Your people have existed longer than humans. Wonder Woman asked him. Before John could answer, Zatara suddenly stiffened in his seat. By our Father, the Son and the Holy Spirit. He chanted while doing the cross. Then he quickly stood up from his seat, surprising the rest. Zatara. Wonder Woman asked, her and the others getting up from their seats as well. No time to explain, I shall inform you all later. Saying that, the resident magic practitioner headed towards the Zeta tube. Recognized Zatara 11. Well. That was unexpected. Hal commented, saying what was on everyone's mind. Indeed. Manhunter added. His mind was suddenly hit with a maelstrom of emotions. He sensed something. Perhaps it would be wise to shelf this discussion for another time. John advised. No, Wonder Woman shook her head. There is never going to be a right time. Not when we have no control of what happens out there in the world. Zatara is not one to overestimate his capabilities. Should he need help, he will not hesitate to ask for it. She looked around the room and stated. Please, everyone, let us sit and finish this meeting. Following Superman's words, they all got back to their seats. Now, Batman and I have been talking to Adam Strange, the League associate tasked with maintaining the Zeta tech we use. We believe there is a way we can shield the planet from outside Zeta tube transmissions. The Flash's words were met with a surge of interest. Finally, they had a shining ray of hope cutting through the darkness. It's not enough to restrict the use of boom tube portaling, but I believe it's a step in the right direction. He concluded. Soup steepled his hands together and hummed in interest. I will allow access to the Fortress of Solitude's data banks. Maybe you can find something in there that might help us. He offered. An offer Barry was going to take advantage of. The Kryptonian race had had a very advanced technological level. He was sure that there would definitely be something there. I believe we have concluded that matter. As chairman, I propose we move on to something else, barring there are no questions. Wonder Woman said that and looked around. After making sure that everyone was satisfied, she turned to Manhunter. Call them in. Manhunter gave a brief nod and then opened his mind to link with Miss Martian and the others. Again, you can all come in. Superman, on the other hand, muttered something. Yet, no actual words came out. The volume of his words were set to a frequency only a Kryptonian could hear. I know you've been eavesdropping the entire conversation, Connor. After this, you and I need to talk. Connor growled and got up from his seat. They are ready for us. Let's get this over with so I can get back to punching something. He told them before Miss Martian could and stormed his way towards the door leading to the meeting hall. Miss Martian, Artemis, Aqualad, Kid Flash and Robin all looked at each other. Is it just me or does he seem to be even madder than usual? Robin narrowed his eyes at Connor's back. Let's go. The League is waiting for us. The rest of the team walked in and stopped to stand next to Connor, who had his hands crossed and looked like he wanted to be anywhere other than there. Right. You're all here. Wonder Woman looked around at the rest of the Leaguers, particularly Captain Atom, who was the League's overseer and who nodded at her in a show of support. I know that it has been incredibly hard, not going out to the field. You have the power needed to do more, yet we have had you stuck doing solo missions with your mentors in your respective cities. Part of that has been a failure on our side. The team needs a base of operations, and with everything that has happened recently, I will be honest and tell you that our focus has been elsewhere. She stopped to see if they were listening. And in light of new developments, the team's suspension from hero work had been extended for another month. Wonder Woman said, and just like she was expecting, none of them were pleased. You can't do that. What? Why? The three comments came from Artemis, Kid Flash and Connor. The rest were in different emotional states. Robin looked thoughtful because Aqualad looked guilty yet helpless, while M'Gan was desperately wishing that all this was a nightmare. Mile. She gently cussed. Wait. Guys, shut up. Robin hissed at the others, then rounded up at Aqualad. Calder, what is going on? She said, in light of new developments, what are you hiding? Robin questioned, his tone growing hard. Aqualad sighed and looked up at the rest. I am going back to Atlantis, and I don't know when I'll be back. The rest looked as if they had been slapped into astonishment. Dude, what? Kid Flash asked. You're leaving. Abandoning us? Artemis asked, feeling a little betrayed. No, not abandoning you. Aden showed all of us, that if we're going to do this right, we need to be better prepared. To be stronger and more skilled. I am going back to the Conservatory of Magic to finish my studies. To get better so that what happened before does not happen ever again. What about us? The team we created. Kid Flash shouted back. Connor, on the other hand, started feeling a ringing inside his head as the words, Conservatory of Magic, ran around his mind like a mantra. Magic, from Atlantis. Maybe that was exactly what he needed to get that power back. To get that strength that he had felt so deserving of. He couldn't keep using the DNA patches. Sooner or later, they would run out. So it wasn't a surprise to him when his lips opened and he announced, I am coming with you. Aden's point of view, 3 days into Aden's seclusion. Power. Power coursing through my body. Unlike fire, unlike the strength granted to me by the Cobra Venom or Blockbuster. This power could not be controlled. Not really. It could only be guided. The aspect of destruction could scale to almost infinite lengths. With each successive jump in understanding and comprehension, the color of the lightning would change. Deepen and grow more intense, more ferocious, until the only thing you could do was buckle up and enjoy the ride. A ride that would promise mutual destruction, if you were not divinity or a cosmic entity who could take it. Unfortunately, I wasn't a divine being or a cosmic one by nature. The Āvātār state was, though. At least to the best of my knowledge. In that state, I was basically master of all the elements and their subsets. I could theoretically use red lightning or any of its other color variants. The color variants were not like those of fire, where each color presented a unique ability in that particular subskill. Lightning was destructive to a much higher degree, and each color presented another increase in power. To control all those colors, my body would probably have to be much stronger than it currently was. Normal lightning, however, was turning out to be as easy as ABC. Already, I had a deep understanding of the destruction aspect. The third day was spent on fully understanding its more supportive capability. Speed. General point of view, Ohio, hidden Cadmus facility. Doctor, let's run it again. This time, put him up against twice the number of battle-class genomorphs and pair each of them up with the telepathic ones. Luther ordered from the other side of the mirror, standing on a balcony. To his front was an arena the size of a football field, created inside one of Lex's many shady facilities. The arena was currently smoking and many sections of it were wrecked. Purple blood splotches and gore covered the walls and floor of the space. That was nothing to the dozens of xenomorph body parts scattered about. Different ones killed in different ways. Of course, Mr. Luther. The scientist was quick to comply. The xenomorph, telepathy type on his shoulder, glowed red on its tiny horns as the scientist typed a few more keys on his pad. The huge metal gate at one end of the arena opened up with a groaning sound. A second later, over 24 giant xenomorphs poured in. Each of the huge ones called battle class had a small xenomorph perched on their shoulders. They stood in place, all watching one figure who was covered in purple blood and had an orange film of energy around his body, allowing him to hover in the air 10 meters off the ground, staring down at the next wave of opponents he was about to face. The figure had the face and body of Tommy Terror and peculiar eyes. Yellow pinpricks in the middle of a black and inky cornea, indicative of what abilities he was using now. Begin. Luther gave the order. The boy moved to comply. He fell out of the air, picking up speed as the orange light was replaced by a yellow one. He landed on the ground and a huge blast of yellow energy escaped his body in a massive wave. The concrete floor cracked apart, spider webs emerging on its surface from the point of impact. The energy blast spread out in a spherical shape, hitting the xenomorphs and throwing them to the far ends of the room. Most died from the wave of energy. Those who didn't, had their organs and bodies broken apart by being mercilessly slammed onto the sturdy material making up the testing arena. Luther shielded his eyes from the bright yellow light. When it died down, he squinted. Dust and smoke covered the area. He cleared his throat and the scientist to his left understood what he wanted. A tap on his pad and huge fans appeared on the ceiling of the testing grounds. The dust and smoke soon cleared out to show the state of the room. Circuitry and foundation frames were exposed through the broken parts of the walls. Most of the corpses from the dead xenomorphs were cleared out by the blast, disintegrated on the spot, leaving behind nothing but ash. In the middle of the whole arena stood Terror. A most enlightening performance. I wish to see more. A voice, slightly electronic, said, appearing from the shadows of the room. The hum of a device heralded his emergence. Sitting on a high-tech floating chair, Metron, the creator of both the father box and mother box, presented himself. This time, do not make it a cakewalk. Nothing has been challenging to the father box. I want to see him, pushed to the limits, so I can understand how this is possible. How the essence of a computer can merge so seamlessly with an organic life form and sustain itself. Luther gritted his teeth in annoyance. On the outside, he kept an easygoing smile on his face. He reminded himself that they needed Metron's assistance to carry out Project Rebirth. Doctor, you heard the man. Let's kick things up a notch. Luther said, crossing his hands behind him. Bring out Project Match. The scientist nodded, throwing wary glances at the new god. Right away, Mr. Luther. Another tap on his pad and the double doors opened up. The first showing of this new opponent was a loud shout of anger. Terror's body acquired a red outline just in time for a white blur to move through the double doors and smash a fist onto the hastily projected red shield. The shield broke apart into small scarlet pieces and Terror was thrown away to smash onto the wall behind him. His body dug into the concrete and a breath of air left him. Another loud cry and he was hit deeper into the wall before he could successfully extricate himself. His inner organs shifted and several ribs broke. Terror opened his mouth in a wordless cry. His head was grabbed and he was pulled out of the body-shaped hole in the wall. Arf! Match, the first Kryptonian xenomorph Cadmus had created before Project KR, screamed in anger, feral and uncontrollable. He swung his opponent by the locks of hair on his head, spinning in place at high speeds. Terror's scalp tore off before Match could throw him away, and the fused being of a living computer and a metahuman rag-dolled through the ground, creating a trail of unearthed concrete before being mercilessly stopped by the sides of the room. Match was left holding blonde hair that ended in a patch of skin dripping with blood. Luthor spared a look at Metron, only to see the new god looking on in apt concentration at what was occurring. Entranced by the sheer brutality yet clinical in his observations. As if sensing the gaze, Metron spoke up. The Kryptonian xenomorph is flawed. A failure, because the gaps in the alien genome sequence have left the subject feral and uncontrollable. Yet, the power he exhibits is precisely 88.567890477566436345 of the upper levels of power recorded by Superman. Interesting. His biology will start degrading in 3 years before fully shutting down after 15 years 4 months 2 weeks 3 days 15 hours 46 minutes and 19 seconds. Luthor raised an eyebrow at the confident approximation of Match's deadline. Is there anything that can be done to stabilize his DNA? He asked, fishing for information. Match was still a viable asset. And if there was a way, then the light would expend reasonable resources to perfect him. There is. Unfortunately for you, you cannot afford it. Metron answered back. A pity. Luthor said, and they both turned their attention to the arena once more. Although Match was an asset, he wasn't the only one. Or even the best. Luthor's smile quirked up at the edges. Project Godblood took the cake. Match screamed and stomped over to the downed Terror. A thin purple aura covered Terror's body, and in a matter of seconds, his body was fully healed. Match jumped up and beared down on Terror's position, seeking to slam onto him and finish the job once and for all. The purple was replaced by orange on Terror's body and his form flew out of range. Match's body dug through the floor and the whole facility shook as if subjected to an earthquake. The scientist tapped another thing on his pad and a brief shimmer of blue light appeared around the balcony before it went away. A force shield was deployed to block any stray attacks to their position. Scarlet beams of heat vision exploded out of Match's dust-covered position only to hit the reinforced shield that had appeared at Terror's front. The beams were reflected off and carved a trail on the left side wall of the testing structure. That's when the real fight started. In an unheard signal, both combatants shot off towards each other. Match from the ground, leaving behind more broken concrete, and Terror from the air, a shockwave blasting out of his position as he flew down. The two said nothing, as they clashed in mid-air, both fists sending forth a blast of air that threw everything away and cracked the viewing glass from where Luthor and the rest were watching. The blue force shield flashed, successfully blocking the shockwaves from reaching them. Punches were thrown and intercepted. Match was relentless. Like a caged animal he fought while Terror gave as much as he received. Which was a lot based on Tommy Terror's metahuman gene, which was super strength. He alternated between the colors expertly, making force shields to block ice breaths and heat vision beams, then throwing off an energy attack to pull away from the Kryptonian clone. The whole testing area suffered a lot. However, something had to give. A bright and intense white light suddenly exploded out of Terror. The light blinded the Kryptonian xenomorph due to enhanced senses, but he luckily used his ears to listen to his opponent's next move. Match's fist shot out and plunged into Terror's chest, only for that to be a mere illusion that disappeared into a shower of green energy, while the real Terror was above him, charging a massive energy attack. With visible strain on his face, the attack drowned Match in the yellow beam that left everyone blinded by it. Luthor and the scientist turned their heads away. The shaking this time was more amplified. Luthor's mind was working double time trying to come up with solutions in case it caved in. Luckily it stopped and everything settled down. When they looked back, it was to see a giant crater in the middle of the room and no sign of match. The doctor quickly tapped his pad in urgency, before looking up at Luther and shaking his head. The sensors in Project Match's solar suit have stopped working. It seems the blast destroyed him, sir. Luther tightened his hands into fists. Are you absolutely sure, Doctor? He demanded. Yes. Project Match is no more, sir. I have seen all I need to see. The Phantom Zone projector is yours, just like we agreed. Metron said and turned away, a portal appearing before him. He weighed the merits of telling them about the boom tube terror had opened before the Kryptonian xenomorph had been disintegrated. Then he decided against it. He was a seeker of knowledge. Nothing else concerned him. Better yet, he had a feeling that what the Father Box had done would sow chaos in the future. Knowledge thrived in chaos after all. Elsewhere. In the elemental dimension, a sudden flash of purple color pulsed deep in the tower connected to the core of Aden's world. The tower was the hub of creating worker drones and maintaining the upkeep of the dimension. Secondary directive complete. Re-establishing link with rogue unit. Incoming transmission. Accept? Those words were what Aden would open his eyes to. This marks the end of part 38 of the story, Āvātār in DC Universe. Thank you for listening. Please like the video and hit the subscribe button to listen more. Hit the bell icon to get notified of all the new content uploaded to the channel ASAP.